Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to the channel. This week we're going to be talking about this new car from Scalextric, the 19 Duffy Collard Hot Rod. Spoiler alert, it's not good. So I should start by saying this is not going to be one of my normal videos. For a start, it's going to be quite a long video compared to most of the ones I usually do. And it's long enough that I've actually had to write a script for it. So bear with me, buckle up, it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. Now the first thing is, most of my audience is non-UK based. So you're probably looking at me holding up this fairly standard looking saloon car saying, why is he calling that a hot rod? Because a hot rod is a vintage car with a big engine in it, and that's not either of those things. So if you're from the UK and you know what a UK version of a hot rod is, just bear with me for a few minutes. I've got to explain some stuff to some people. During the 1960s, while oval racing in America was developing and moving from road courses to the large permanent oval tracks we know today, in the UK, oval racing developed in a different direction altogether. The NASCAR, as it is now, equivalent production saloon car racing formula in the UK was named hot rods, rather than stock cars, as that term was already in use here for a different form of oval racing. The hot rod formula cars were production-based cars, the everyday cars that everyday people drove, four-cylinder engines up to 1.6 litres in capacity. The tracks are oval, but much smaller than American tracks, at around a quarter of a mile, and they have no banking. They're usually completely flat, concrete or tarmac surface, and were often laid round the outside of an existing motorcycle speedway or sprint car track. Cars race clockwise because we sit the other side of the car to drive it, and lap takes broadly 15 seconds. So it's close racing, and it's close up to the crowd too. This form of racing became popular in England, Scotland, Ireland, also spread to the Netherlands and other parts of Northern Europe in a more minor way, as well as becoming quite popular in parts of South Africa. So when I say hot rod, I mean these. So you're probably thinking, why would Scalextric make a car from such a niche formula? Well, the 1970s and 1980s were very much the golden era for this form of motorsport, and while it is still alive and well today, the sport does not receive quite the television and media coverage it once did. Back then, the UK only had 3 television channels, BBC One, BBC Two and ITV. BBC Two was mostly an arts channel at the time, and on Saturdays, BBC One and ITV both ran rolling live sports programmes from midday to about 5 p.m. The BBC's programme Grandstand featured football, soccer, and mostly posh sports like cricket, horse show jumping, tennis, golf and so on, while ITV's World of Sport was more focused on working class sports like boxing, wrestling, darts and minority motorsports like rallying, motorcycle speedway and oval racing, especially hot rod racing. As a result of this, and there being so few channels, the viewing figures for World of Sport were often in the region of 8 to 10 million people every Saturday. So hot rod racing was big in the UK during that time. Kids sat down with their dads and watched hot rod racing. I know this because I was one of them. We knew all the drivers and all their numbers. In fact, it came common practice to refer to the driver by his car number and then his name. So for example, he wasn't Mick Collard, he was 19 Mick Collard. It wasn't Barry Lee, it was 351 Barry Lee, and so on. And all of those kids are now in the UK and 45 and over. Yep, UK based, mostly men aged 45 and over, who are of an age and an era when you got a Scalextric set for Christmas or for your birthday. That's what happened. That's the overwhelming proportion of Scalextric's domestic market today. These people that like these cars are their demographic. The ones with slot cars again now, the ones that used to have slot cars that we all recognise are the easiest people to get back into the hobby with the right release of the right car now. So, while releasing this car may seem odd to the rest of the world, in the UK domestic market, a car like this, in this formula of racing, is a no-brainer for Scalextric, or it should be. And for me, as exactly their target market, as I've described, this is the bit of easily accessible motorsport from my youth at around the time kids were really big into Scalextric as well. It really is a no-brainer car to make for Scalextric. So having taken the decision to make the car, why make this particular one? Well, like any form of motorsport, there are a few names that end up being referred to as the greats. Hot rod racing of the era had a number of star drivers. The top 5 of the era is something of a debate between people. However, whichever 5 somebody picks, they are all pretty sure to include the same 3 in their 5. 306 George Polly, 351 Barry Lee, and of course number 19 Mick Duffy Collard. So Scalextric were going to pick one of those drivers for their first car in a range, and they picked Mick Collard, and more specifically the car he won the World Championship with in 1980. Let's look at the car. We'll start with the physical form of the car and move on to the decoration afterwards, because that's a whole other bag of ferrets in itself. We'll start from the top with the elephant in the room. This roof number. Now, I don't know what this is. It must be a part for something else they've reused the tooling for, but I can't work out what. There's only 2 things wrong with it. It's the wrong shape, and it's in completely the wrong place in the car. As you can see, all hot rods had a roof number in the centre of the car, and you can see on the pre-release rendering of the car from Scalextric, there is a roof number shown in the middle. And here it is on the car, nowhere near the middle, shoved over to one side like it's a sign on a Domino's pizza delivery car or something. And this is not even the worst one. I've seen some photos online of this at about some kind of 45-degree angle. Something has gone seriously wrong in the production process here. There's obviously been no oversight from Scalextric management. They haven't issued instructions to China, and they've done zero quality control. Obviously, nobody at Scalextric even asked to be sent a photo of the first one off the production line, or if they did and looked at it, they didn't know what they were looking at. You can't blame the people in China for trying their best. They don't know any better. Presented with a roof sign like this to stick on a car, they put it in the only place on the roof they're familiar with, the only place it makes some kind of sense to them. Moving on to the front screen, well, these cars didn't have glass in them. They were stripped down to the bare minimum to save weight. But what they did all have, every single one of them, was a fixed metal strip fun visor across the front of the car, as you can see. This and the roof number are the 2 things that really mark this kind of car out from any other. And it's not there. It's just not there at all. They've made zero effort with this car. They've just recycled the old Mk2 Escort rally car tooling, so the detailing on the front and rear bumpers isn't the detailing of a Ford Escort, it's just the holes where Scalextric mount the bumpers on their models. And the holes on the side are just where they haven't put any mirrors into their standard shell. Hot rods didn't have mirrors, and they didn't have holes where mirrors used to be either. And the other thing here is the wheels are all wrong. Hot rods of the era used to run larger rear wheels than front, and with much deeper dishes as well. Again, these are defining features of a hot rod over any other formula of production saloon racing car. This zero effort approach, of course, also means that the car exhibits a standard rear exhaust with silencer box, again straight off of the rally car, and again something you would never see on a hot rod, as these were often straight through pipes and all exited out the side of the underneath of the cars, and never at the rear, and never through a silencer. And then there's the wheels themselves. Now, yes, they're white, and yes, they're 4-spoke wheels, this is correct, but these are Ford RS 4-spoke wheels. The wheels on the Collard car were a different design of 4-spoke wheel, and what you might think, man, Dave's being a bit picky here, quite importantly, the 4-spoke wheels that were on this car are called Revolution wheels. Now, if only there was some kind of clue, you know, maybe painted half the length of the car, that could have been a guide for the design team on this. Oh well. If we move to the interior, we see the standard rally roll cage. If we look again at the pre-production renderings for this car, you can see that there's the correct 3-point roll bar for this car in that rendering. Scalextric's design department clearly intended to do an amount of retooling for this car to make it right, but somewhere along the line this has been stopped. Someone has said no and do it as cheap as possible, and as a result Scalextric have produced probably the least accurate physical representation of a car in their entire history. All they've done is taken the standard Escort rally car they've produced for years and made some more, without spending a single penny on retooling costs, and what they've done is saved a lot of money on production costs, because they've not included half the bits. There's no front bumpers, there's no wing mirrors, there's no windscreen wipers, there's no glass, there's no light lenses, and there's no expensive LEDs or wiring or any of that stuff that's inside a normal Escort rally car. So they've also saved on assembly costs as well, because they haven't had to pay people to put all of those bits in either. So what are Scalextric charging us for half a Ford Escort rally car? Yep, exactly the same price as a full Ford Escort rally car. So with that catalogue of disasters in the physical form of the car dispensed with, let's turn to the decoration on the car. And sadly, it's really not good news here either. Here's a picture of the car it's supposed to look like. I'll leave it in the corner of the screen for reference while we look at the decals on it. Once again, there's an elephant in the room to start with. This car is the car that Mick won the championship with in 1980. Now, Castrol have changed their logo font only 3 times in the nearly 125-year history of the company. And this version of the Castrol logo on this car didn't exist until 2001, 21 years after this car raced. I mean, come on guys, you're not even getting the basics right here. Someone at Scalextric has signed that off. So, as they can't even get the basics right, I might as well just go through the whole rest of the car and quickly cover all the other bits they've got wrong. Back to the roof number again. The font is kind of right, but for some reason someone has gone to the trouble of putting a blue outline round it when the real one had a drop shadow. It is no more difficult to do a drop shadow than an outline in a graphics package. This is just careless. The Revolution Wheels font, we've mentioned this before, it's kind of the right font, but the aspect ratio of it is all wrong. This is all squished up narrow and only takes up half the space it should. On the real car, it's half the length of the car. If they'd made the font wider, it would have fitted properly. Again, simply lack of care. They've made a reasonable effort with the Autocross logo, but the font for Bracknell is completely wrong. The font for the driver's name on the door is completely wrong. And again, there's a quality control failure here. I've seen pictures of these cars posted on the internet with the position of this decal in varying places along the door. It seems to vary from car to car. Mine, as you can see, has it overlapping the door handle. Others I've seen as much as 5mm between the name and the end of the handle. And while we're on quality control, I've also seen a few people complaining that their car is missing the G off the racing on the decals on the front here. I mean, it's just not good enough. Some of them have got a G, some of them just say racing. The Goodyear logos on the wheel arches, well, at least they're right, but they're at least twice as big as they should be. Obviously, this is the same incorrect Castrol logo as it is on the bonnet, and for some reason there are white pinstripes either side of these two coloured bands here, which never existed on the original car. And on this side, on the real car, the word Bracknell was before the Autocross logo, so different on each side. Scalextric have just made the same thing twice and put it on both sides, so it's completely wrong on this side of the car. The roof graphics are wrong. You'll see here one long rectangle where it should be a shorter one here and another separate one at the back. Oh, and these rear pillar logos are on upside down. I guess based on how badly wrong they got the livery colour on the recently released Bastos Camaro, I should at least be thankful they've managed to get the basic red and blue about right. I just don't know what's going on with Scalextric quality control. It is non-existent at the moment. It really is. So having shown why Scalextric made the car, and that they didn't do it very well, let's examine why it was important that they should have done it well. On Facebook today, you'll find a number of groups dedicated to this classic era of hot rod racing, populated by exactly Scalextric's main demographic, as I say, UK-based, mostly males aged 45 and over. And they are not small groups. Here's one with over 6,500 members. Here's another one with 8,200 members. And here's another one with nearly 10,000 members. As a matter of measure, that's a bigger and more active group than most of the global slot car hobby dedicated Facebook groups. And these groups are active, very active, with frequent picture posts of scans of people's old photographs from race weekends back in the day, photos of cars and drivers, and the posts get loads of replies, people sharing memories of when they were at particular meetings. These folks are truly fanatical. They never tire of this nostalgia, and everyone remembers at least a dozen drivers from the past. If they'd done this car well, they could have sold far more than the 2,000 units Dave Kennedy at Slot Car News frequently tells us is the target number for a slot car of any livery. done well, this car would have attracted sales to non-slot car hot rod enthusiasts just as shelf art, because this, really importantly, is the first time a company of any size has made anything for this massive untapped market. When Scalextric announced they were making this car, they had all of these people, me included, in the palm of their hands. A fair number of people, me included, pre-ordered it in January 22, with the expected arrival stated as Q3 22. That came and went, and after a full year and more of waiting around, the car finally arrived, and the people they had in their palm of their hands looked at it and said this about it. Look, okay, I know, this is just a plastic toy. It's not supposed to be a precision model, but it kind of falls short even as a plastic toy. And it really should have been done well. And the marketing people at Scalextric know it should have been done well. Last year, during the summer, I made a few trips to my local stadium, and I saw nice, brand new, shiny advertising hoardings with Scalextric branding all over it. They were making a big effort and spending a lot of money to push their brand familiarity at this audience through the whole of last year while this car was on pre-order. So at least those people at Scalextric knew how important this car was to get right. Dave Kennedy at Slot Car News regularly tells us 2,000 units is the kind of minimum bar to which they'll make a slot car, and they'd have sold 2,000 units easily of this, possibly as many as 4,000 units. And none of those people just want one car, they want a car to race against. So they've sold 4,000 of a George Polly one, or a Barry Lee one. And then each of those drivers had probably 3, if not 4 different well-known liveries of the same body shape of car. And no, not everybody would have bought those, but you'd probably sell 2,000 units of each of those, and probably 2,000 units of as many as half a dozen other drivers, all just different liveries of the same well-done body shell. On top of that, all of those drivers then went on to race a Toyota Starlet body shell, again in many liveries, for many more years of the golden age of this sport. So I think by actually doing 2 body shells properly, Scalextric could have sold, well, tens and tens of thousands of units of slot car. And they've done it wrong, and people are sending them back. So I started off trying to make a video about this car. But I don't think I have made a video about this car. I think this video is about something else. I think this car is just a symptom. It's not really a problem. The problem is, people are sending this car back. People who should have been new to the hobby, people who are already in the hobby and already like the brand, are sending this car back. Some people, for whom the name of this brand is the name of the hobby, who had these sets when they were kids, who would come back to this, have now just discovered that this isn't very good. And I think they've lost that market. It was there. Marketing knew it was there because they invested a lot of time and money in advertising at the point of being right in the face of the audience at the circuits. They knew it was a good idea. They knew it was a good market to get into. Somewhere along the line, management and a bean counter who was looking for short-term savings rather than long-term gains has ruined it. And they've kind of ruined the potential of a whole chunk of the hobby that's just not going to come to the hobby now. And I think that's bad. So the problem for me really is that people are sending this car back. And they're not just sending it back to Scalextric. They're sending it back to small independent hobby shops who pre-sold this car in good faith. And it's a disaster. People are sending it back in large numbers. And small hobby shops at a time like we're living in, where times are hard for small businesses, are having extra overheads because they're having to refund money to people and deal with sending these cars back. It's not just damaging for the hobby, it's damaging for our hobby shops Scalextric's own retailers. The thing is, at design stage, when we saw the renderings, the people who came up with this idea, the people who wanted to make it reality, the marketing people, all of the PR people, they knew they were onto a good thing. And I'm sure they fought their corner. But in the end, an accountant decided we'll do it on the cheap. So I guess if I want anything to come from this video, I want the guys that fought hard to make a decent job of this car to be able to show this video to the people who made those bad decisions and say, I told you so, because they probably did.